you've made this call for a compact between employers and unions. So you can hire migrants as long as you train Australians. How would this work?
So what we know is there's two big problems that's facing the economy at the moment, the labour market more broadly. Number one is that with the borders shut, we've had net negative migration over the last couple of years, and there is some key positions across the economy where we're struggling to identify people to fill those roles. What we also know is business has become completely addicted and reliant upon short and temporary visa workers coming over to plug temporary gaps. And they've dropped the ball in terms of training and developing Australians or retraining already employed Australians to fill the roles that we need into the future. So we have this constant cycle which goes through where business failed to train and develop and then put up their hand to say we need visa workers to come over and solve those gaps. What we're saying is let's have a look in terms of increasing our migration intake, more permanent migration, make sure it's properly aligned with labour market testing. But for every worker that you bring into the country, business should have a requirement to either train an Australian for that role or to help contribute into a fund to develop Australians for future roles going forward.
Are you talking about big business, small business, all business?
No, well, all business. Whoever is...
So that could be expensive for them, I guess.
Well, at the moment, some of the visa categories already do have some funding requirements in place. It goes into consolidated revenue, and I think you'll find most state governments would struggle to identify what happens to that money when it goes into that pot. What we do know is we've got a fundamental problem here in terms of a lack of skills development. We have a lack of young Australians completing apprenticeships. We've got big gaps going forward. Now, if we simply just say we'll increase the migration intake and we don't fix those problems, then we're just going to have the same cycle roll again year after year. What we're saying is putting forward a proposal in advance of the summit to say this is a meaningful solution which will address both problems and hopefully provide a good pathway for young Australians and existing Australians to be trained for the jobs of the future.
What do you make of this idea from the opposition to allow more pensioners into work, to have people able to hang on to their pension payments and come back to work? Do we need that?
Andrew, if you have a look in terms of our membership at the AWU, if you look at a lot of our members, they work primarily in blue-collar industries, and quite frankly, a lot of them is hard work, like it's hard labour. You don't work into your late 60s. Like our members look at retiring into their early 60s, and so the thought of trying to get them back after doing, decades worth of continuous shift work in heavy industry to say, come back and lend a hand back on the shop floor again, I don't necessarily think that's going to stack up.
So it can work in some industries, but not those, that's for sure. So how bad is the skills shortage in your estimation? From all your time at the AWU, how does it compare? What sort of examples are you hearing from workplaces on what work is not being done or how understaffed workplaces are?
I think there's two things that are playing out at the moment. I actually see it more so in some of my other roles where we get access into lots of professional skills. Technology is probably one of the single biggest ones that I've heard business across a range of different industries and sectors talk about as a fundamental gap in the market. We're just absolutely struggling to identify people. That's number one. What we also know is having a look at some of the bigger projects that are underway, the Rewiring the Nation plan that Chris Bowen and the Prime Minister and others have kicked off on is a great initiative to help plug all the renewable projects. But right now, in trying to find enough construction workers to undertake that work is going to be difficult. And so we know that's going to be that's going to be difficult to deliver on that into the future. And so I think there's two things that are playing out at the moment. A big one is actually making sure these are genuine gaps in the market. It's been something that we've dropped the ball in the past to make sure that there are roles being advertised at the appropriate rates to try and attract locals to fill those roles in the first instance. If those tests have been met, then I think we can start to look and broadening horizon around the world to see where we could have good people to come over to work in Australia. But in the migration programs that we had in the past, where you can set up routes into Australia, call Australia home, as opposed to coming over for short periods, doing a little bit of work here and then heading back to your home country.
I'm interested in you saying it's hard to do that transmission plan, which is all about their renewable energy, climate target, etc. Do you need a lot more migration to do that?
No, I think what you're going to have to do is have some alignment across all the construction projects that are on foot. So we look after a lot of workers in civil construction, in tunnel construction, and also in resource construction as well. And if you have a look in terms of some of those projects coming up, there is a big peak coming through with those projects already underway. Now, if you bring forward all of the transmission line construction, again, it's another key area that we look after in our union, then we can start to see that there's going to be huge demand on construction workers going forward.
Have you spoken to government on that?
Yeah, we've started some conversations with them on that.
Are they listening? Have they got any answers?
No, absolutely. I'd say unlike the previous government, I think they're realistic to reach out and hear from all sides in terms of what the problems are. We bring a unique perspective, which is being able to identify across a broad range of industries around the economy to see where there's some issues and where there's some pinch points. And this is a good initiative. We want it to work really well. We want our members to have good, paid, secure jobs. What we know is there's a huge amount of work coming forward.
The ACTU is coming to and you're the Vice President, or a Vice President, is coming to the summit with some reasonably radical ideas. They want energy prices fixed. They want a windfall tax on companies with big profits. You've spoken about that in the past. Could any of these see light of day?
Well, dare I say, following the lead of Boris Johnson here, but we said with the energy crisis taking place in Australia, if particularly the gas companies are unable to find any meaningful solutions in place to make sure that Australians have enough of our own gas at affordable prices, then we should look at a windfall profits tax. I'm not saying that is something that we want to absolutely drive as the first centrepiece of our policy direction, but it needs to happen. Energy prices
Government will never do that, though, after the mining tax experience, will they?
Well, I think you'll find the Treasurer move very quickly to say that's something that they're not looking at the moment, but it's not going to stop us, nor the ACTU, continuing to push forward those ideas.
Will that be a big theme at the summit then?
Well, at the moment, I think that the single biggest challenge the government has got is solving the energy crisis. I think it genuinely sits just above nearly everything else. That and frankly, making sure that our members get a decent pay rise. But there are so many businesses right now who are struggling with extraordinarily high energy prices, both electricity and gas. And I think unless we find some of those solutions, then the great future about our manufacturing renaissance and rebuilding the manufacturing sector, I find it hard to see how we deliver on it if we don't have energy as a competitive advantage. We've got a gap to get there, and it's going to be really hard for the government to navigate through that.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of Australia accessing more gas?
So I've been a big supporter in terms of allowing more gas. I think the Victorian government, frankly, should have been doing a whole lot more over the last couple of years. Have been very vocal on that. Also, in New South Wales, at the moment, it takes the best part of nearly a decade to try and get a project up and off the ground. It's ridiculous in terms of the steps that we need to go through for environmental approvals and generally regulation approvals in this country to get these initiatives up. We're certainly supportive of getting more gas out. We should be exporting gas to the world long into the future, but we have to make sure that we actually keep some of our own gas for Australians. We're the only gas producing nation in the world that does not keep a proportion of our gas to benefit our domestic users before sending it around the world.
Is the trigger enough to do that? Government might use?
At the moment, the trigger that Malcolm Turnbull designed is, as strong as a wet lettuce leaf. And what has to happen is the Minister for Resources, Madeleine King, needs to have a look at reforming that to include both a price and supply. At the moment, it only deals with supply. The trigger's not been properly pulled before, it's not come into effect, and it's under review at the moment. You need a solution that deals with both. There's no good just saying, the gas company saying, oh, here you go, here's a couple of cargoes of gas available on short notice. We need to make sure that it's there for the long run and it's delivered at rates that are cheaper than what our friends over around the world are purchasing our gas at. At the moment, we are paying more for some of our gas than our friends in Korea, than our friends in China are getting.
Now, you've advocated for a while for a look at nuclear energy. The opposition seems keen on that. Chris Bowen thumps the table and says it's the most expensive form. What do you say to that?
Well, I think Chris is right at the moment. I think, unfortunately, I've been a very big supporter of the nuclear industry and remain so. And nuclear energy, I think it's got enormous opportunities to provide baseload power. But the race for technology change at the moment is leading heavily towards hydrogen renewables. And I think it's getting harder for the industry to find a solution to operate here in Australia as it goes forward. That being said, and certainly still remain very much committed to it, but I think the headwinds are working against it right now.
And just finally, Dan Walton, we've seen some union leaders in the past have very successful careers in politics, Bob Hawke and the like. Bill Shorten, perhaps less successful. Do you have any political ambitions?
No, I don't. And I've got a long book of bets that many people have joined in on, and I'm welcome to take yours as well if you'd like it.
Dan Walton, thanks for your time.
Cheers, Andrew.